The storm that night wasn't just in the sky, it was inside me. I stood at the cracked wooden door of my farmhouse, staring at the two figures standing on my porch, drenched from head to toe. Their faces were pale, eyes hollow with exhaustion, clothes clinging to their trembling frames. The rain poured down so hard it blurred their outlines like ghosts. When I asked who they were, the taller one spoke softly, her voice quivering through the wind. "We were only going to stay one night," she said. I blinked, unsure if I'd heard right. "Both of you, at once?" I replied, half in disbelief, half in concern. Not if you believe in kindness, second chances, and stories that remind us what humanity really means, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. Kindly tube your support helps us keep telling stories that touch hearts and change lives. I wasn't expecting company, certainly not two strangers in the middle of nowhere. My farmhouse sat miles from town, surrounded by acres of overgrown fields and forgotten fences. After my wife passed away 3 years ago, I'd bought this place cheap, hoping to rebuild my life in peace. But peace had a strange way of turning into silence. And silence, as I'd learned, could be deafening. The taller girl introduced herself as Mira, maybe 20 years old, her brown hair plastered to her face, eyes wide and alert like a deer's. The younger one, Sophie, couldn't have been more than 15. She clutched a tattered backpack and looked like she hadn't eaten in days. I hesitated before letting them in. Out here, strangers were a gamble. But one look at their shaking hands and soaked clothes was enough. I stepped aside. "Come in before you freeze." Inside, they stood awkwardly by the door, dripping puddles onto the old wooden floor. The air was thick with the smell of rain and wood smoke. I tossed them towels and pointed toward the small fire I'd started earlier. Sophie crouched near it immediately, hands spread to the warmth, while Mira stayed standing, her gaze flicking around the room like she was searching for escape routes. I noticed how guarded she was. Something about her posture screamed, "Don't trust anyone." I warmed some leftover stew on the stove, and as they ate, I asked the question that had been gnawing at me since they arrived. "Where are you two coming from?" Mira looked down at her bowl. We left the city. Things weren't good there." I waited for her to continue, but she didn't. Sophie mumbled between bites, "We were just trying to find somewhere safe." Safe. That word hit harder than I expected. My wife used to say the same thing when we first moved out here, to get away from the noise, the pressure, the constant struggle of city life. We thought the countryside would heal us. It didn't. Cancer came faster than the seasons changed, and by the time I realized how much she was hurting, it was too late. Now this farmhouse was just walls filled with echoes. That night, I let the girls sleep in the spare room. I told myself it was just one night, as they'd said. But the next morning, when I stepped outside to feed the chickens, I saw them sitting quietly on the porch, still there, still waiting for something. Sophie smiled shyly. "We made breakfast," she said, pointing to a plate of scrambled eggs and toast on the table. Mira stood behind her, silent but watchful. "You didn't have to," I started, but she interrupted. "We'll be gone soon. Just needed to rest a little longer." I nodded, pretending not to care. But as days turned into a week, their presence started changing the rhythm of my life. Sophie helped in the garden, humming tunes that somehow made the air feel lighter. Mira fixed the fence I'd been ignoring for months, her hands skilled and steady. The farmhouse, once filled with emptiness, started to sound alive again, with laughter, footsteps, and quiet conversation over dinner. Still, I could tell they carried a weight they wouldn't speak of. One afternoon, while fixing the old truck, I noticed a bruise along Myra's arm, dark and fresh. She caught me staring and quickly pulled her sleeve down. "It's nothing," she muttered. But that night, I overheard them talking in the kitchen. Sophie's voice trembled. "He might find us, Mira." Mira whispered back, "Not here. He won't come this far." The next morning, I confronted Mira gently. "You two running from someone?" Her eyes darted away. "Please, Mr. Hale," she said, "we don't want trouble. We just need time." I sighed. I wasn't sure what kind of danger they were in, but I knew the look of fear that runs deep. It was the same one I'd seen in my wife's eyes during her final weeks, that desperate need to hold on to something safe. I told them they could stay as long as they needed. Mira looked like she wanted to argue, but Sophie hugged me suddenly, catching me off guard. Thank you, she whispered. For a man who hadn't been hugged in years, it broke something open inside me. Days grew warmer, the sun brighter. Together we started fixing the place up, painting walls, clearing the overgrown path to the barn, planting new seeds. Mira was cautious, always looking over her shoulder, but sometimes I caught her smiling when Sophie chased the chickens or when I cracked an old joke. For the first time in years, I wasn't just surviving, I was living again, but good things have a way of being tested. One late afternoon, a black SUV rolled up the dirt road. It was rare for anyone to come this far out. Mira froze the moment she saw it through the window. Her face drained of color. It's him, she whispered. He found us. Before I could ask, a man stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark coat. His eyes scanned the house like a hawk searching for prey. I stepped outside, heart pounding. Can I help you? I called. The man smirked slightly. Looking for two girls. They took something that isn't theirs. His tone sent chills down my spine. There's no one like that here, I said firmly. He took a slow step closer. Mind if I take a look around? Behind me, I heard Sophie's muffled sob. Mira appeared at the door, standing her ground. You don't get to touch her again, she said, voice shaking but fierce. That's when I understood. He wasn't just someone they'd stolen from. He was the reason they'd run. Abuse, control, whatever it was, it had driven them to flee into the storm that first night I moved between them and the man. You should leave, I said, my voice lower now. He sneered, but something in my eyes must have told him I meant it. I might have been older, but I wasn't afraid. I'd already lost everything once, losing again didn't scare me anymore. After a tense moment, he spat on the ground and got back into his car. The SUV kicked up dust as it vanished down the road. Mira collapsed to her knees, trembling. Sophie ran to her, clinging tight. I stood there, the adrenaline still burning in my chest. That night, as we sat around the fire, neither of them spoke much. But before heading to bed, Mira looked at me and said quietly, "No one's ever stood up for us before." From then on, they started opening up bit by bit. Mira had been working as a waitress in the city, trying to care for Sophie after their mother passed away. The man, her mother's boyfriend, had grown violent, possessive. When he turned his anger towards Sophie, Mira grabbed what little money she had and fled. They'd been sleeping in shelters and bus stations until the night the storm drove them to my farmhouse. I listened, feeling something shift inside me, a purpose I hadn't felt in years. I told them they didn't know me anything, that sometimes life gives us people to protect so we can heal too. Over the next few weeks, we became a strange kind of family. Sophie called me Mr. H, though I told her she could just say Jack. Mira started painting again, filling the empty walls with color and warmth. One day, she painted my wife's old garden shed, turning it into a small art studio. She said she wanted to make it her thank you. Months passed, and the farm began to bloom in ways it never had before. The laughter that once vanished with my wife returned in echoes of shared meals, early mornings, and the sound of Sophie reading aloud from old books. They stayed longer than one night. They stayed long enough to change what I believed about life and loss, and when autumn rolled in, Mira came to me one morning with tears in her eyes. Jack, she said, we got accepted into a housing program in the city. A real place. Safe. I don't want to leave, but it's time. I nodded, hiding my own sadness behind a smile. That's what second chances are for, I told her. On the day they left, Sophie hugged me so tight it hurt. You saved us, she whispered. I shook my head. No, I said softly, you saved me. After their car disappeared down the road, I stood alone on the porch, the same spot where I first saw them months ago. The house was quiet again, but this time, it didn't feel empty. It felt full of something invisible yet powerful. Hope, maybe. Or love reborn in another form. Weeks later, a letter arrived. It was from Mira. Inside was a small painting of the farmhouse, sunlight spilling across the porch. On the back, she'd written, "We were only going to stay one night. Thank you for giving us a lifetime." If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindly Tube. Your support helps us spread kindness, hope, and the belief that small acts of compassion can change lives forever.